In fact, if you go back 5-6 years ago, there was a debate, there was a raging debate as to whether the shilling exchange rate was overvalued. And at that time, the Bretton Woods institutions, the IMF, World Bank, felt that actually the exchange rate was overvalued by anywhere between 20 to 25%. And so I think we try to maintain a fairly artificially strong exchange rate, but also at the cost of loss of international reserves.
That is Dr. Kamau Thuge, the Central Bank of Kenya governor, speaking about the Kenya shilling, and he was indicating that actually there has been a possibility of overvaluing of the Kenya shilling. As we speak, based on the latest numbers, is that the Kenya shilling, according to the central bank, was exchanging at 150 shillings, a few cents, against the dollar. Against the sterling pound was 182 shillings, against the euro was 158. Of course, the rate is different if you go to different commercial banks. Let me begin with you, former Senator. I mean, when you listen to the CBK governor, first of all, how accurate is what he's saying? But then again, are we running out of options in managing the Kenya shilling such that it's depreciated to this extent? And it's not just against the major currencies, but also even in the region. What's happening?
Let me first clarify. The figure of 150 exchange rate is the official, what the central bank calls the official rate.
The website figure.
But in business, we've been buying the whole of last week at 157. If you're an importer, that's what we've been buying at. And that is part of the problem. The government, in reality, is maintaining a dual exchange rate system. You know, one that they call official, and another one that is what you get when you go to the banks, this is contrary to the official government policy that the shilling was liberalized, and the exchange rate is free and so forth. But why are we where we are? One, I think the argument that the PS is giving about IMF and World Bank clearly shows that we have an institution of the Treasury or the central bank that is dependent on other institutions to determine on the economic or financial or monetary policy. This is the challenge we have in this country, that for even small decisions, we have to be advised by IMF and other institutions to do this or to do that. The fact about currency is all about your trade, really. If the status of your of trading, if your imports and exports are balanced, your currency will remain strong. Where you have that challenge, and I want to give you an example. In 1984, I went for employment to Saudi Arabia. The exchange rate was 3.65 Saudi riyals to the dollar, 1984. Today, it is 3.65, 40-something years later. It doesn't change. I mean, it's all up, so it's not about other stories, it's about your business, your trade balance. Well, so I think when we are not looking at our exports, you are not looking at critical factors that contribute to that trade imbalance, and you're just focusing on other issues. I think we end up with this. But let me come to what is the issue really regarding in the foreign now. The issue is about the debt. In my view, there's no other factor that is contributing to the current very quick depreciation of the shilling than the debt, because government needs to pay the debt, and it's really taking up a huge amount of the forex reserves that we have. And because of the need also to maintain, the exposure of the loans, stable or lower, the government has developed this dual rate. So this official rate of 150 is deliberately trying and keep the debt low. So what has it happened? What has it done? If you are an exporter and you've got money in your account in a commercial bank, you can only sell to the bank at the official rate of 150 today. You cannot sell it at anything else. So the bank will buy from you because that is what the ruling of the central bank is. So I'm an exporter. I have money in my account, $1 million from my tea exports. I can only sell to the bank at 1 million, at 150. That's official rate. But the bank now, that money, when they get those dollars, they can sell to me, an importer, or to you, at 156, 157, 158. So that's why the last 2-3 years, the banks are the ones that have been making huge profits on the exchange. So I think the challenge we have is the loans that are really behind all this chaos that we have. And the government's preoccupation really in this forex is about how to maintain their debt, exposure low. That's where the challenge is. But globally, of course, there has been also other challenges. Price of petrol went up. Price of most of the raw materials went up. The demand for dollar increased significantly. In the business where I am in 2020, we were buying a ton of raw material at $400. We're now buying at $1,000 a ton. So the demand for raw materials for many of our imports really went up significantly. And of course, then our inflows have also been declining. Our tea exports, our coffee exports, horticulture, everything, because after Corona, everything has been declining. Tourism. So we have been relying as a nation largely on diaspora inflows.
Right.
Really. And so that's why, for me, when I see this government focusing on investors traveling a lot, I find it misplaced. Focus on your businesses here and focus on export. How can you generate? Because unless you do that, at the end of the day, you will still have this problem. There's no two ways about it. You're borrowing and you are not having exports, and there'll be no inflows.
Okay. And Alex, a lot of conversations have centered around saying that the government is doing what needs to invest in what would grow those exports. Are there quick wins in such a situation, or we are at the mercy of the global market?
From a tax perspective, I think there are some quick wins. I think just recently they introduced the export promotion and investment levy. I'm sure it hit businesses hard because it was an additional cost. And Kenya being a net importer of some sorts, then clearly you're pushing the pressure on the dollar. Then, of course, we've had people complain around the tax environment in the country. Basically, we're saying the government is not facilitating that production that people are looking for. The government is not facilitating that manufacturing that businesses are looking for, so that they're able then to generate produce or products which they can then export and, of course, improve on this dollar pressure or foreign exchange pressure that we already have. And facilitation, of course, means, of course, taxes as well, because in any business, the government is a 30% shareholder. So if you're able to then sit with the business people and tell them, fine, we are going to give you this particular incentive. For example, we've had in the draft medium-term revenue strategy that we are trying to reduce the corporation tax rate, say, from 30% to 25%. That is one of the things that could be useful to make sure that people then spend a lot more money towards facilitating business as opposed to paying taxes. And those are just some of the few examples that I see.
And when you talk about export investment promotion levy, and I remember it was part of the big conversation areas, so what is supposed to happen? Once they collect, are they supposed to invest in activities that promote exports, or it's used to finance other issues, including paying salaries?
Well, there's no promise there around, if we get this money, you're going to make sure that we facilitate your exporting business. That promise is not there. Whether it's being done, of course, it's questionable. Yeah, we haven't seen it being applied that way. It's the same thing with the, well, I don't want to mention, housing, and we're being told that you're building.
You just did.
But anyway, that's the other thing. So it must be something else. Either the debts that Mheshimiwa here is talking about, which are beyond our control, or something is wrong.
But how should taxation policy work? If you give it a name, Exports Investments Promotion Levy, that money, what should it do?
Essentially, it should facilitate exporting, but how it works is then it hits the exporter, because they're being told when you import certain things, remember it's called export levy, but it applies when you're importing stuff into the country, right? So for him who is into manufacturing, what that means is that if he's not able to source some of the raw materials from the Kenyan market, and more times are that he won't be able to get the raw materials he needs, he has to import into the country so that he's able to then produce or manufacture, then it means this particular export promotion and investment levy is not working, because initially it was planned in a way to make sure that it protects the local manufacturers. But are we there yet? I don't think we are there yet. So I think it's backfiring.
Okay. Dr. Kiru, tell me, first of all, how does currency work? And when you start talking about depreciation, overvaluing, what are those technical terms for the Kenyan to understand what exactly the experts are saying?
Okay. First and foremost, I'm an economist, a development economist, and it is true the Kenya shilling in the past had been protected, and for very good reasons. You see, if you talk about liberalization or allowing the market to run your economies by the forces of demand and supply, you are saying that you're going to what they call to thin your borders and allow your currency to just float freely. Let it be determined by the market forces of the shilling. And you see, our shilling will only gain value depending on what Kenya has to offer the rest of the world. If there's so much demand in terms of goods and services made in Kenya, then the shilling will gain value. And in that case, and if that was the case, then, and we had enough goods and services to offer the world, then we have no problem where the shilling takes us, because we know that our strength in the global market will keep us safe. So in that case, you have no problem letting the shilling be determined by the forces of demand and supply. But now here you are, you know the truth that you have, that you're a net importer. And you're a net importer of final products, a net importer of even food, a net importer of fuel, something that runs your whole economy. In that case, you know that a weak shilling is your biggest disadvantage. And when you have debts like we have in Kenya, a weak shilling like we have, it brings in a lot of uncertainties. You tell the KRA, give us this target. Even if the KRA eats or does not hit the target, it's like the money you need is moving every day. It's like you never know how much you need to collect from KRA. And because of that, you want to create some certainties in the market by ensuring that the shilling, the depreciation of the shilling, at least gives you an idea of how you're going to plan. You're going to prop it, you're going to cushion it. That's a reasonable thing, that's a practical thing to do. Mm-hmm. But now we're in a situation whereby the Bretton Woods institution are saying that, come on guys, you say that you're not pegging your shilling. You say that you're going to let your shilling afloat. And what are you doing? Why are you propping it? And remove those props, and you know how that works. And why are they telling us that? Because you're telling them, look, we're in a bad situation, the debt issue, the what issue, we need your support. And they're like, if we're going to be supporting you, you need to, of course, they're using pure economic, where I started, pure economic reasoning, whereby they're saying that by letting the shilling go to its true value, what they're saying, the true value of the shilling, you're going to be making your exports cheaper, you're going to be attracting foreign direct investments, you're going to be strengthening your economy. That's what they're telling us. But what is the data saying? What is the reality on the ground saying? Well, last time I checked the data, actually our exports in agriculture had lost by 2.2%. Coffee, tea, so the data is not saying the same. And we need more data about...
it lost in value or in volume?
In volume, in value, in how much it's supposed to, the billion is supposed to bring us.
Okay.
There was a decline in that. And we need the data to tell us, is the data speaking what we are expecting? Because then, even the Bretton Woods institutions are the first one to tell us about evidence-based policies. They're seeing that every day. So that they can tell us, when they tell us to let the shilling float freely and bring in all these uncertainties that we are seeing, and as we talk here, we don't know when it's going to end. And therefore, and this brings me to what we are seeing it's a repeat of something that happens in the 80s. You remember the structural adjustment programs and what had brought them, the petrodollars, the indebtedness, all the money we borrowed from during the oil shocks, all that money that gave selling oil, were asking who they can lend that money to, and we were happy to take that money. Developing countries, Sub-Saharan Africa, were happy. Then come the 80s and it's time to pay, and we couldn't pay, just like today. And you went to the Bretton Woods institutions and they're saying you cannot pay because your economies, your macroeconomics is not right. You need to introduce more macro stability, liberalize, reduce your workforce and things like that. This is exactly happening today. And let us look at history. We saw that the SOPs had hurt the people, structural adjustment programs hurt the people then. They are still doing the same today. And so the conversation comes, and we want to talk about adjustment with a human face. If you want to talk about adjustments in these economies to make them work properly, where is a human face in it? If you look at the people, if you look at how people's salaries are being depreciated, people are taking home less than $500 a month. People are taking home very little. You can see the education system, the cuts in education. Government is saying that we are providing financing, but in reality on the ground, the financing is in the book. In the ground, it's not getting there. I was in my married village yesterday, and we grow coffee in my married village, and we were just chatting with women, and they told us, hey, we are in trouble. We were told to register for fertilizer, and we registered for fertilizer, but it has not come. And as a result, our coffee is about to bloom, but we have not applied the fertilizer. And I come from Murang and asked them, what about our neighbors across Nyeri? We have farmers there, and they haven't put fertilizers. So here we are not expecting. I'm talking about something I was talking with people in my village last weekend. Yet the fertilizer subsidy is what this government is talking about. So at the end of the day, we understand the government is cash-strapped, the government needs our development partners. And I think the conversation we need to have is, how do we stabilize the shilling? Because a stable shilling creates certainty to the country.
Right.
It creates humanity in this adjustment so that people don't suffer too much. We've seen how people are really suffering. And at the end of the day, we want to start that conversation with our development partners, the Bretton Woods institution, look at how can we put a human face in these adjustments. We know we're in a terrible mess, and we know we need you.
Do they listen?
But I don't think we need to go there.
We need to start with that.
I don't think so. I think let us not, I don't
go ahead
for 1 minute that our problems are IMF or World Bank. The reality is our problem is about leadership, it's about governance, really. That's what puts you that's what has put us where we are. That's why our shilling is down there. It's not for lack of you've just mentioned about your coffee. It's not for lack of things to export, or it's not because of our whatever. But if the management of our finances, our government, is done in a way that would have not resulted in these huge debts, I can assure you we would not be where we are. So it's not about the shilling being overvalued, it's all about leadership. The same Kamau Thuge was running that treasury all those years that he's talking about when the shilling was overvalued. And we used to ask him, sitting in front of us in Parliament, and you would tell, our debts are sustainable. We can borrow. He'll tell you, look at Japan. He'll tell you stories. Now he's sitting on the other side of the table. He says, so you keep giving excuse. I think our challenge is about leadership. That's where we are. It has nothing to do with IMF and World Bank. If we manage that, this is a very thoughtful country. We have a lot that we can export. We have a lot that we can do. And we've always had that net situation, by the way, even in the days when the shillings was stable. By the way, if you look at the last 20, 30 years, the number of times the central bank intervened when the shilling was whatever is very limited. It's very limited. It's very occasional. Most of the time, our shilling has always remained floated based on our inflows and outflows. That's the way it has always been.
I want to get to Dr. Rugo, but first, Dr. There's something you said that the shilling had been protected. What do you mean with that?
Protecting the shilling, like for example, when you give the guidance in terms of how how it should be allowed to fluctuate in a particular. That's a kind of protection scheme. And during the COVID, we saw deliberate efforts by the central bank governor then going out of the way to prop the shilling by putting dollars out there in the market. At least we saw that. So in times and again, there's been those efforts of trying to prop the shilling because we know our situation. Of course, and I agree with you, a lot of this problem it is us who have caused ourselves, the management of the economy, the debt and all that. It is us. But at the end of the day, we know that we are vulnerable with a very weak and determined shilling. And because of that, there is really some, if we want to be practical about this, we need to know how much we need to collect as a government to meet our obligations. Our both domestic and whatever. But right now, you don't know how much you need, because you are paying in dollars, right? And there's no certainty of how much that dollar is going to cost you, and you're collecting taxes in Kenya shillings. So that kind of uncertainty, it's even bringing, it's affecting all these other good things which are meant to happen, like the foreign direct investments and all that.
Okay.
So we need some kind of certainty at the end of the day.
Dr. Rugo, you look at the report of 2022. I think it's from the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. Yes, it is. And what you're talking about here, the imports were to the tune of 2.49 trillion shillings. The exports were 873 billion shillings. So that's, the imports are almost 3 times our exports. But you look at a figure there of petroleum imports, it was 597, so call it 600 billion shillings. Obviously for this year it's going to be more because it has become more expensive. But do you see any possibility of winning the war for the Kenya shilling as you continue to talk about growing the exports? What is that sure thing that will get us there, or it's just pray and wish?
Yeah, I think first of all, I think it's important for us to appreciate that you cannot continue with the current level of expenditure. You know, we seem to be talking about the Kenya shilling, the exports, how much dollar. Because the whole discussion here is how much of foreign currency is coming in and how much is going out. Because whatever is coming in, we are doing 2 things. And that's what I think what you're asking about the value of the Kenya shilling. It's either you are buying it or you're producing it. So in other words, either you are getting, when you go to the bank today, it's either you earned a US dollar because of a service you provided, or you went and with your Kenya shillings bought it, you know. So as Bilo did explain earlier, is that the amount of US dollars coming, foreign currency coming in, and the amount going out is not commensurate. And that is even with the supplementary estimates. Just shows just how much we have adjusted our external related debt payments by 216 billion in the supplementary budget that was published with details. But back to your question, I think that right now we must look at other sides of the economy, because remember, whereas debt is the biggest expenditure right now, this financial year alone, debt is going to take about 1.86 trillion. Initially it was to take 1.62. So we've increased it by a couple, 200-something billion. But that's not the only expenditure that we are incurring, because we are running a budget.
I mean trillion.
Trillion, sorry, trillions. Yes, I meant trillion. Correct. So because we moved it from 1.625 to 1.86, according to the estimates that were published last week. So we cannot just look at, of course, the conversations going on right now, and the president is on record saying, his trips are for our own good. Can those trips be more to discuss about what Kenya can export out there, not just labor? The coffee discussion. I think I've seen an article today, the CS, Linturi, saying that now the coffee market is back to normal. We know very well a lot of coffee actually has not been sold almost at price and the like, and the conversation, go to tea. So there has to be, and these are products that are available. As she's saying, really it's time for the coffee to bloom, it's time for the tea, tea production and the like. So we have to work on that. On the other hand, we also have to work on our interest rates in our local market. Because what has happened is that when you have very high interest rates, it simply means that, first of all, credit is not accessible to many people, but the only person who then, the only institution that is able to buy that credit is government. So there's no money within the active productive. And remember, government is not a productive institution in the sense of it's not buying a product, it's not importing something to go and sell or to produce. A lot of this is just, facilitatory in that sense, whether you're thinking about, the roads you're building and all. So there are no quick fixes, but they are hard fixes, which can be done. So on one hand, we have to tamper our expenditure, and we have pushed this a lot. We have to tamper our expenditure. Are there even certain programs that can wait a bit? Because as far as the debt situation is currently concerned, some of it we have to sort it out. But we also, have we entertained a conversation perhaps of restructuring? I know this is a difficult conversation. Of a formal default. Again, another very difficult conversation of saying that perhaps some of these redemptions, can we carry them forward? I know it's a difficult conversation, but at one point something will have to give, and it's either public services or the debt situation. As it is right now, one option is delay gratification, painful option. Yeah, but when you look at the current government, there seems to be no effort to delay anything. They seem to be saying whatever we had planned to do, we must do it. And part of it is even to say, are there taxes that actually can be introduced at a later point? Because what has happened is that now, and so I talked about interest rates first. Let me come to the second aspect of just that. The other thing that is affecting a lot the consumptive power, which has to do a lot, with whether our Kenya shilling is powerful because it's about trading, is also about how much disposable income people have. Disposable income basically means how much money is left to me. Can you say something very interesting, that the government is a 30% shareholder in every business? I struggled with that, but as much as I agree, that they take 30% of the profits. When you introduce the kind of taxes you have introduced with the veracity you have introduced right now, you shock the economy. Even an external investor does not want to come and start putting in money, because it's like, oh, am I going to be putting in money purely to finance government in terms of taxes, in terms of, because you need to create employment, you need to employ people and the like. I feel that there can be a delay to some of these things. There can be a slowing down, so that then we go over this debt repayment hill, but otherwise the two seem to be running almost parallel. So instead of the budget going down, it seems to be basically going up every year. So no quick fixes, but hard fixes.
There's something you've said,
yeah.
Formal default. You mind explaining what that means?
Yes. So formal default means that you don't wait for the people you owe money to come for you. You offer yourself and say, this is the situation I find myself in. How can we have this conversation? Of course, both are defaults. It's a default. Basically, you're saying, I'm not able to honor my initial commitments. And let me throw a spanner in the works. And perhaps that formal default can start with the domestic market. Why do I say that? All the people who have bonds, you see the way they have reacted. The reason I have...
Wait a minute, I need to understand something. So you're talking about the treasury bills and bonds, and you're saying that you can have a formal default on that. So you speak to them, or you give a circular, or how do you do that?
Whatever you do, you can have a conversation. Let's take the example of Ghana. Ghana tried to avoid that road completely. In fact, there's a funny story of the Minister of Finance basically even reading scriptures and saying nothing shall shake, the currency. And 2 weeks later, they were talking of the haircut, basically, and it was all about the local. The reason for that is that it's in our local market where we have the highest interest rates, whereas our external payments are now being pushed up because of the exchange rate loss of the Kenya shilling. Our local is interest rate driven. What was the last coupon that was published, I think, 2-3 weeks ago? It was about 15.5%. In terms of interest rate, what it's promising to pay back. Now, you know very well that in this economy, there is nothing you can invest in that will give you a 15% return. For you to be able to pay back, without digging deeper. Perhaps it's time to have that conversation so that we don't wait until a point where we have to choose between providing health services and education services and paying the bonds when they are due. Perhaps there can be a conversation. I'm putting this as an option for conversation out there.
Okay.
Because Ghana avoided that route, but finally went there. And people took a haircut. People lost money in their domestic market. Perhaps an option. I would like to hear what my colleagues would want to think, but I think it is a viable conversation so that then we don't wait. And you can see even with the numbers we are talking about here that allow me just to pull this from just 1 second. When you pull the budget documents, the supplementary budget. Yes, here I have it. When you look at the supplementary budget, the internal. Yes. So when you look at, and this should be page what? Anyway, the supplementary budget, when you go to the table that basically has the consolidated fund services, the expenses we are paying, right. You basically are saying that our internal debt interest, bonds and bills, is revised to 646 billion against 272 billion of external. So our biggest expense in terms of our debt is also domestic. And this is a conversation I think as Kenyans we need to have. You know, in fact, it's the reason why I was asking you, where are government officials? Where is the CS Treasury? I had expected him to be part of this panel, you know, the PS Treasury, to come and explain these things, because that conversation will be held now or in the near future.
Interesting. And of course, I mean, there's that 2 billion euro bond that we should be paying June 2024. It's not too far, it's just over 7 months. I look at the amount we took, 2014, it was $2 billion. That was the value of 1.75 billion shillings. As of the current exchange rate, according to the Central Bank of Kenya, that would be 301 billion shillings. Look at that across a period of, excuse me, of 9 years. I want us to listen to the president. He was speaking about what someone here mentioned about cutting expenditure. He is cutting expenditure when it comes to travel. Watch.
Ile pesa ya watu kurandaranda na kuzunguka. Niliona jana watu wa magazeti wanasema nimepunguza milioni 500. Hapana, si milioni 500. Nimepunguza bilioni 11.
So he says he's cut 11 billion shillings from that travel, but he also explained something why it is important for him to travel.
Kuna watu wengine wananipigia makelele, mbona umeenda safari hii, mbona umeenda safari hii. Hiyo ndio kazi yangu ya rais. Mimi ndio chief agent ya Kenya. Mimi ndio ambassador ya Kenya ya kupanga vile Kenya itasonga mbele.
So, I'll get to you, Alex, but first, former senator, so tell me, what are you dealing with here? Because in the year 2022-2023, the government of Kenya, inclusive of the counties, spent up to 37 billion shillings. The national government was 20.3 billion shillings on travel. Of course, significant amount of that, I think close to 14 billion shillings, was in local travel. What are you assessing when you hear the president say that we are cutting by 11 billion, but also defending why he has to travel?
I'm one of those people who have been criticizing him the last few weeks on TV on this many travel, and for a different reason. This government came to power on a platform of economic revolution, and my argument has been, charity begins at home. Look at the economy inside the country first. There are investors, people who have been invested in this country. People who are farming, people who are in everything in this country. This is people who you need to sit down with. Go to every sector of this economy. Sit with them. Find out how we can, enhance productivity, how we can enhance exports, how we can increase our food security, and many of the things that need to be discussed. But I think this government has been an overdrive in trying to travel abroad and look for investors from outside, and spend a lot of time and resources, really. And 1 year down the road, you will tell me of one single investment that has been put in, despite the hundreds of delegations, thousands who have come here Forget about the ones who even went, even the ones who have been invited to come. So I think, you have to have confidence in your own people and start from there and try to, like the farmers meeting he was having the other day, discussing yesterday, I think. That is what he needs to do with every other industry in this country. Go and meet people and find out where do we have the competitive advantage, where do we need to invest more, what do we need to do to enhance that competitiveness. That's how we would have resolved all these issues about taxes and so forth. But when you go out, then you are simply selling the country out there. But when you tell an investor, investors understand what's going on in every country nowadays with this technology. You don't need to be told that Kenya is ABCD. They can find out everything literally. And they take their calculator and find out what is the rate of tax, what is the cost of energy, what is the cost of this, what is the cost of that, and what's the level of corruption. They look at so many things and decide, no, I'm better off in the next country. So it's not what you go and tell people out there, it's what you need to do in the country to be able to attract investors. So I think it's a very good thing that the president announced that they're going to reduce the cost of travel. And I think that needs to cascade down all the way to every government ministry and to the county governments, because it's ridiculous that in today's, when this country is on its knees and people are suffering, our people from MCA to small county officials to the ministries, everybody wants to travel to everywhere in the world for benchmarking, which never ends. We have been benchmarking for the last 50 years. and with really, it doesn't, it doesn't. So we're spending a lot of money, and I think travel is one. Not only travel, by the way. If you take a pen and paper and go through the printed estimates of the government, you can remove a third of that expenditure. In everything that happens in the offices, you find, you'll see them, those adverts. You'll find Ministry X is advertising. They want to do a corruption perception survey. The next ministry is doing a similar thing, and the other one will do also. There is so much. Because we are not using zero-based budget. Everybody has the same budget that has been there before, and you just tweak a bit to get a little more money. So I think there is need for the government to appreciate, and I appreciate that the president says yes, he's seen it, the concern people have expressed about the many trips. I mean, look, if you want to go around the world, you'll get a trip every day, because there are conferences all over the world every day. I mean, so it's not about, okay, can you go out and sell the country? It's about, really, don't you have, which one is the priority? And I think there is more priorities, even in the country. It's not about going around and campaigning. You sit down with the ministries and sit down with the people, industries, and everyone, and find out solution to the problems. No one, I work in business, I don't know of any government ministry that has sat down with us to say, this industry, yes, what are you guys doing? How can we enhance productivity? How can we increase, how can we lower the cost of production? How can we make things? Nobody's concerned about those things. Everybody's thinking about. Right. So I think there is the genuine concern, and I'm happy that the president has realized that Kenyans are concerned about his frequent trips and the cost of travel generally in the country. And I think it's an important thing that he needs to cut down. But in the larger scheme of things, cost of government, the expenditure is something that they need to address. The focus of this particular administration has always been on revenue. From the day they came to power, talking of how we can increase revenue, The issue is not just one side. I mean, you must, cut your size. You cannot live beyond your size. And we can see it this week alone. And that belies his argument. The president, this week alone, they announced in the supplementary, they're going to increase the current expenditure, isn't it?
Yes.
By about 180-something billion.
Yes.
Now the expenditures will go to 3.9 trillion.
Yeah.
And really, and your revenues are going down. In the same week, they announced KRA is short by 79 billion its revenue. So there's no commitment.
Wasn't there a circular directing accounting officers to cut the expenditure by 10%?
Well, you see, you do that circular, but you go to Treasury and ask for more money again.
Apparently costs more to cut.
and Alex, so these things are, you are not committed to some of the things you're saying. You cannot go to Parliament and ask for 189 billion more to pay, and then you ask the ministries cut down 10%. It doesn't add up. And your Treasury guys are telling you we are losing revenue we are short by 79 billion. I would have thought they will take a supplementary to Parliament and say reduce expenditure by 79 billion because our revenues are down. That's the right thing to do.
Alex, tell me, because I mean, those that have a payslip, I think some of them are here, they continue to complain that the value of the I almost said paint slip, but I think I would be right to say that. Such that people are taking home less than 65% of their pay slip. If you have to look at all the deductions that are coming, and more are coming, especially from the health sector. Yet, when you go to the market, goods are more expensive. Obviously, certain goods are now attracting VAT at a higher level. Yet, we keep being told about consolidation, fiscal consolidation, that you either reduce the expenditure or you raise the revenues, or both. It appears that reducing expenditure is not one of those things that the government would love to do. What then shall we do? And what is sensible when it comes to management of revenue in such a situation?
I think for the longest time, Gituku, the focus has been on the tax measures, Finance Bill, Finance Act. We somehow don't pay too much attention to the budget side. And I think that is now coming to bite us, because if you just look at 2023-2024, against the initial budget of 3.6, which I now hear is moving to 3.9 with the supplementary estimates, our plan was to raise 2.5 trillion through taxes, and to finance the budget with 2.5 trillion from taxes. Basically, we budgeted to borrow even when we started. And it basically tells you that this idea of increasing the budget every year and perhaps not looking at how we performed last year and the things we need to prioritize on is just getting out of hand. It's time perhaps we have a discussion so much around the budget side. Now, coming to the revenue side, first quarter, July to September, we are short 79 billion. I was tracking this performance last year, 2022-2023, and somehow there was a magic in the fourth quarter that made us reach this particular target. I don't know what that magic was, and perhaps that will be the same magic that will
Is it real collection or correction of figures?
It's out there, we need to discuss. Because somehow I was tracking it quarter by quarter, and I could see that we are falling short in terms of revenue.
200 billion.
But just when you were in the last quarter of last year, boom, we've met our target. And here we are saying the first quarter we haven't met. I'm assuming maybe second quarter we don't meet, third quarter we don't meet, but the fourth quarter we'll meet that budget target for the revenue. So coming to pay slips and what then we are taking home and what is it that we need to do, you see, coming back to 2020 when we had COVID, the government then reduced the corporation tax rate, reduced the pay-as-you-earn, reduced the VAT, if you remember, 16 to 14%. And in that particular year, KRA themselves reported that they've never seen a better growth in revenue than what happened in that year. So what it told them is you can actually reduce your taxes and increase collection.
Right.
But here we are in this never-ending trip of increasing tax rates every year. And if you are also to look at that draft medium revenue strategy plan, we're even talking about harmonizing the VAT rates in East Africa. Of course, Kenya at 16% and our brothers at 18%. Of course, I've discussed with the revenue officers, and they're saying they do not necessarily mean that we are getting to 18, but it looks like a soft spot for them to just say, let's increase this thing, because now it's increase, without having regard to what exactly we collect and what is the impact towards what you get as your disposable income at the end of the day. So it's an unfortunate
Let me ask, is it possible to observe trends? For instance, if the VAT on fuel was raised from 8% to 16%, is it possible to observe if there is a changing in volume of that people are buying?
It's already out there that the volumes have reduced in terms of what people are buying. And apparently it's that everyone who is then using the fuel, they've stuck to the budget. They're only spending, consuming less liters. Okay. So if per month I'd budgeted to use 10,000 in terms of my petrol, I'll still use the 10,000. It means I'll consume more, consume less. I'll also travel less. So guys are adjusting. And that, in terms of revenue collection, is also being seen. And government, of course, they have these numbers. They know what the effect of increasing the petroleum to 16% has had.
So what is the solution out of that? If you are in government and you observe that, what do you do?
I think you first stop digging the hole. Because it's more or less like an experimenting thing. You've tried it, it's not worked. So what do you do? I think one of the things, do you think of going back? Now that you've had years of success and you've seen how it has worked, do you also want to explore that? Then look at what the region is doing. For example, Rwanda, they want to reduce their corporation tax rate to 20% gradually over a period of time. And you're in the same East African market and you're competing with them. And you can see the trend that they are taking. And they're not alone globally, because everyone is trying to reduce taxes to make sure that they facilitate consumption or production. But as a country, we have this notion that if we increase taxes, that's when we collect more, which it has been tested and it's not working.
Okay. Dr. Kiru, so data must tell us something. I mean, I don't think KRA was announcing that they have a shortfall just for the sake of announcing. It's so that it can inform decision making. But then again, someone says, I think it was him, that we need to learn from the previous budget cycle as you go to the next one. Unfortunately, our budgeting begins in September, just like 2 or 3 months after the passage of the previous one. So there's very little time to actually observe what has just transpired. Is that part of the problem? But then again, those in government have that responsibility to reflect on what history is telling us. What shall we do to ensure that lessons are being taken?
Now, I think there's enough data. For the first, for once we can see economic theory and practice happening right in front of our eyes. The Laffer curve, or the relationship between taxes and revenue. Our government seems to, regardless of what economic theory, and they seem to be very good in the theory of economics, but this one they have ignored. The theory tells us that the relationship is not linear, that the government seems to believe that the more taxes you levy, the more revenue. Theory says that there is a turning point. It is a quadratic relationship, whereby there's a point at which more taxes cause a drop in revenue, and we have said that. Even with I was on record in a forum we were discussing at the university, saying that, okay, KRA missed the target, but they collected more than they did last time. But then in retrospect, when I thought again about they have got all these massive ways of getting more money. That the Finance Act gave them a big muscle. And then if you look at what the boost from the Finance Act, and if you look at the inflation, we are not sure if we actually collected more or not. There is a query there, but nominal, they seem to have collected more. But the bigger problem is we tell them to set very high targets. And it seems like we've asked everybody, how can we get more money? And all these ideas are being implemented. Oh, have this levy, have this tax, I don't know, and just this, and all those kind of things. And all these ideas are being taken. And the problem is that that is already hurting people in terms of the taxpayers. And there are incentives in terms of employment. In fact, now, low-income payslip people are thinking that they should go informal. Because if you go informal, you are doing your boda, you are doing your tuk-tuk, you are doing what? The paying slip is not there. Your money is yours, you know? They're making informality look more attractive to low-income earners, yet you know that the money is at the bottom of the pyramid. A few smaller taxes, but many of them. So that bottom of the pyramid is being attracted, as we speak, into informality. And a lot of people and the middle income earners are also being attracted into informal business side hustles. So at the end of the day, it's like we're trying to talk about formalizing businesses, but then again, we're making informality more attractive. We are making consultancies look really nice. A lot of employers are changing from permanent and pensionable to consultants. That is happening right in front of our eyes. Are we learning these lessons? Like he said, don't dig the hole any deeper. Stop it.
Okay.
It's not working.
Let's listen to what the president thinks about the times you're in.
Na mimi nafurahi sana kwamba mimi ni kiongozi wa Kenya wakati huu, wakati mambo yako magumu, kwa sababu inahitaji mtu kama mimi kuongoza maneno yakiwa magumu vile ilivyo. Kama tungekuwa na wengine, Kenya ingekuwa imezama. Lakini mimi nataka niwahakikishie ninyi watu wa Dagoretti na watu wa nchi yetu ya Kenya kwamba Kenya itasonga mbele, Kenya itabadilika na tutakuwa na taifa ambayo tutajivunia kama Wakenya.
So, Dr. Rugo, the president there says that it could have actually been worse had it not been him. But where is the place of accountability?
Yeah.
And can we keep speaking hope to an economy? And I speak about accountability because there was a conversation in this country about the Finance Act. We are going to collect this amount of money. We've been asking questions about, you plan to collect 73 billion shillings for housing levy. How is it being utilized? There's more noise than answers.
Yeah, I don't think I have any right to say he's not the person for this kind of situation. That's him to decide. Two things. One, we were going to be where we are now, regardless, because a lot of these debt obligations were incurred already before even he came into power. He was part of that government that got us here. So yes, one could say he's seen the problem, he's been part of it. Perhaps now it's time to be part of the solution. Accountability is a big thing that we are not talking a lot. One of the words until I think 2-3 weeks, till devolution conference, that had almost disappeared from this government is word corruption. You didn't hear much of it, and I think on this platform we've said a lot about that. I still think unless we rein in corruption, runaway corruption, scandals after scandals, money being collected without proper accountability of what it is being spent on, including even just the debts that have been incurred in the last, the report of Parliament, the Public Debt and Privatization Committee, asked very hard questions when you read through it. They say, and they were talking about the debts that have been incurred in the last 1 year. And there were many questions about the conditions, about the terms, about what that money is going to do. And that raises questions. That for me raises concerns. So unless we rein in accountability and make it a reality in terms of how we engage, we will talk all day. And I hope the president also. And there's been very good initiatives. I was part of a meeting 2 weeks ago with the head of public service. That seemingly basically is trying to engage on that matter. But it cannot all be all talk. There must be responsibility. There must be an accounting to Kenyans of where is this money going, what is it being spent on. When money delays to be sent to schools, where is it actually going? Because we are still collecting. We are still collecting monies. So for me, unless we are out there pushing and taking responsibility and people being taken to book who are responsible for the state of our economy, we can pump in as much money as we want into the system. But if the bucket has a hole, and a lot of it is also pouring out, that raises a lot of concern. And for me, that will remain a black hole unless there is very decisive action. And I hope the president and the government actually is serious. And for the rest of us, really, nobody wants this government to fail, for the very basic reason that the cost is so high for every Kenyan. It's already so high. So we want them to basically be able to do what they have said. So as Dr. Joy was saying, we stop this rhetoric of we will do all these grand ideas. Let's come down to the ground What does Kenya need right now? It needs this concerted effort. What do farmers need right now? Things that basically can push the economy are moving forward. So for me, I'm looking for action, not talk.
Yet, Senator, as we get to the end of the conversation, you would imagine that someone is listening, but Parliament doesn't appear to be listening, because even when presented with a supplementary budget, they will pass it. Yet you're busy here talking about cutting expenditure. What then are the options for Kenyans?
It's unfortunate. I think that is unfortunate that our institutions, especially the watchdog institutions like Parliament, is not carrying out its mandate effectively and has become part of the executive. Because, for example, what the president has just said, it should not go without because when you are out there campaigning, even without campaigning, even as the ordinary people out there, we know the economic situation. There is data available. There is information available. You know what the economic situation is. You know how we are growing. You know what our debt is. Everything is known. And when you are campaigning, you hired experts. You put a team together and you came up with a manifesto. You said, when we get in, we are going to do ABCD to address these challenges. But when you come in, you say, we didn't know how bad this thing was. And we keep looking back, through the rear view mirror. I think Parliament has a singular responsibility, really, to hold the government to account on everything and do it on behalf of the people who elected them. The president was elected to do certain things. Parliament is elected to do certain things. Everyone has his own mandate clearly set out. And that is the beginning of accountability. When there is no accountability to Parliament and other watchdog institutions, then the country cannot go forward. The whole reason why we have Parliament and all these other independent offices is to ensure that the checks and balances. And so there is accountability on the people who are running the government. Particularly, everything is structured about you are elected to run a government, the rest of it is accountability on you. Parliament is accountability on the executive, judiciary, all of the independent offices. So if they don't work, and that is the unfortunate thing, that we seem to be focused on our own personal interest. You are appointed to run an independent office, your concern is to retain your job. So please the boss. You're a chairman of a small parliamentary committee, you're concerned about please the boss and keep your chairmanship. You forget about the electorate. And so I think it's really sad to see Parliament completely, abandoning some of their basic roles of oversight. And I want to mention this before, because because it's one of the things that was mentioned, that as a government nowadays all over the world, market cannot be left alone to determine everything. The state has to intervene. And we've seen this happening in many countries, even on exchange rate. States intervene from China to America, all over the world, because markets can be imperfect, there can be distortions, there can be so many shocks which cannot be allowed, to cause sudden disruptions in the economy. For example, if the shilling tomorrow goes down to 160 in 2 days because of some demand, central bank is supposed to sit and watch. That's not the way to be.
They should not.
The reason why we have state agencies like that one is to intervene to stabilize. Because there are people who are manufacturing, there are people who are importing, there are people doing things, there are consumers, cost of living. You must stabilize against those shocks. So some of the interventions in the market, in the forex, in the years, is because of that stabilization. Every country has it, by the way, and that's one of the fundamental responsibilities. But I think Parliament should appreciate one thing. No shilling that has been spent by this government has not been voted for by Parliament and appropriated. Everything, when he says school capitations, it has been voted for.
It's true.
There is an appropriation act, when it should be spent, how much should be spent. So if there is no money that has gone to schools for capitation, where did the money go? That's a simple question. You just call the guy and say, the money was voted for. It's not something, if there's a debt repayment, this has been voted for. Everything has been provided for in the budget. That's why we have budgets.
Okay.
Otherwise, there's no use.
All right. And of course, you may have seen that clip of a senior member of Parliament indicating what goes on there. You don't want to play it because you need to authenticate it first. But here's the feedback that has come from Kenyans on X, at Citizen TV Kenya, at Sam Gituku. The hashtag to use is daybreak. General Lazaro, you're saying that government a government that doesn't listen to economic experts ends up with the historical inflation like Zimbabwe and others. Sir Nixon Dugire, I really would want to know how much we as a nation have gained monetarily from the many foreign trips made by our leaders, besides the many conversations and pending promises. Ole Shonko, for the economy to be stabilized, I believe a lot of investment needs to be done in manufacturing. The conversation really needs to awaken us because the Wanjiku is not convinced that the economy is coming from ICU soon. Babu Michael, with the previous promises by the president about stabilizing the shilling, which have never been, I think someone is sleeping on the job, and a certain level of incompetence has been left to go too far, from the economic advisors to Central Bank of CBK governor. In General Zarogan, you said that curriculum-based test will slowly kill the appetite for stealing exams. Otherwise, government should look for ways of grading candidates from banditry-prone areas. Some of them never attended school for the whole term. I think you mean CBC-based assessment. Candidates doing KPSEA will be the most who will face many challenges because of the transition of educational system than those doing KCPE who are in their familiar calendar. I take this opportunity to wish the candidates best of luck in the examination. That is Bobotieno Owino speaking to us. And I have to thank you all for making time to have this conversation. And many issues raised, looking for answers. It is up to those in authority to implement. Senator Kero, Alex, Dr. Kiru and Dr. Rugo, thank you for making time for us, and all the best to the candidates that are sitting the examination starting this week. Bye for now. This has been Daybreak. My name is Sam Gituku. See you again some other time.